They rejected him the moment they saw his resume. A single dad, career gap, not flexible enough. But just as he walked out, he solved the CEO's biggest problem in seconds, and everything changed. If this story inspired you, like the video, subscribe for more real-life stories, comment below. Where are you watching from? The waiting room smelled faintly of fresh paint and expensive coffee, the kind meant to impress visitors before a single word was spoken. Daniel sat near the window, hands folded tightly in his lap, staring at the city far below. Cars moved like small, obedient insects, each one going somewhere important. He wondered if he would be joining them soon, with purpose, or heading back home with another quiet disappointment tucked into his pocket. His jacket rested stiffly on his shoulders. It had been pressed the night before, sleeves carefully steamed while his daughter slept on the couch, her school bag still clutched in her arms. He remembered lifting her gently, promising he would be back before dinner, promising everything would be okay. Promises were easy to make. Keeping them felt heavier each day. A digital clock on the wall blinked 10:17 a.m. Daniel calculated automatically. 48 minutes until he needed to leave if he wanted to reach the school on time. He had mentioned this to the receptionist when he arrived, offering a polite smile to soften the inconvenience. She smiled back, professional and distant, as if time worked differently for people like her. The door opened. Daniel Carter. A voice called. He stood quickly, smoothing his jacket, nodding once as if to steady himself. The conference room was large, bright, and intimidating in a quiet way. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed the skyline. A long table stretched across the room, already occupied by 4 people. 3 laptops were open. One man at the far end sat without a screen, tapping a pen against a notepad, his brow furrowed. "Please have a seat," the HR manager said. Daniel sat. They began with standard questions: experience, previous roles, skills. Daniel answered clearly, carefully, choosing his words the way someone chooses steps across thin ice. He spoke about systems he had built, problems he had solved, nights spent debugging code while the world slept. Heads nodded, but eyes drifted back to the resumes in front of them, as if the real story lived only on paper. Then the page turned. The HR manager paused, just a second too long. "I see a gap here," she said, tapping the page lightly. "Nearly 3 years. Daniel inhaled slowly. He had rehearsed this part. "My wife passed away," he said. "I became a full-time parent. I continued freelancing, but my priority was my daughter." Silence followed, not uncomfortable, but calculating. "I'm sorry to hear that," another interviewer said, already typing something into her laptop. The man at the far end, the CEO Daniel assumed, did not look up. His pen tapped faster now. "And currently?" the HR manager asked. "I'm a single father," Daniel replied. "My schedule is structured but reliable. I've never missed a deadline." The HR manager offered a polite smile, the kind that carried sympathy but no commitment. "Our environment can be very demanding," she said. "Long hours, last-minute changes. We need someone who can be flexible." Daniel understood what was not being said. "I am flexible," he said calmly, "just not careless." A brief exchange of glances passed between the panel members. The decision, it seemed, had already been made somewhere between the gap in his resume and the word single. The technical questions that followed felt lighter, almost routine, as if they were checking boxes rather than seeking answers. Daniel solved each one easily. He noticed the CTO pause once, rereading a line Daniel had explained, but no one lingered on it. The CEO continued writing. His jaw tightened. At one point he muttered something under his breath. Daniel caught only the words system and failure. Finally, the HR manager closed her folder. "Well, Daniel," she said, "we appreciate you coming in today. You clearly have experience, but at this time, we're looking for someone whose availability better matches our needs." There it was, clean, polite, final. Daniel nodded. He had expected this. Still, something tightened in his chest. Not anger, not sadness, just the familiar weight of being assessed by circumstances rather than capability. "Thank you for your time," he said, standing up. As he walked toward the door, he glanced once more at the CEO. The man was staring at the notepad now, lines scratched hard into the paper, frustration written plainly across his face. Millions of dollars, Daniel guessed. That was the look of a problem no one in the room could solve. Daniel placed his hand on the door handle. The clock in the waiting room ticked in his mind. School pickup. Another apology he didn't want to make. Behind him, the CEO exhaled sharply. "This problem is killing us." The man muttered more to himself than anyone else. Daniel paused, just for a second, and in that second, the rejection no longer felt final. Daniel's hand lingered on the cold metal of the door handle, the CEO's words still hanging in the air like unfinished business. He could have walked out. He probably should have. Every instinct told him not to turn back, not to offer more than what was asked, not to step outside the invisible line drawn the moment he was labeled inconvenient. But something in the CEO's voice wasn't corporate frustration. It was personal. It was the sound of a system collapsing under its own weight. Daniel released the handle and turned around. "I'm sorry," he said carefully, his voice calm but steady. "I didn't mean to overhear. But what problem are you referring to?" The room went still. The HR manager's eyebrows lifted slightly. One of the interviewers stopped typing. The CTO looked up, surprised, then curious. The CEO finally raised his head. His eyes were sharp, tired, and clearly unused to being interrupted. "We're done here," the HR manager began, but the CEO lifted a hand. "It's fine," he said, studying Daniel. "You're leaving anyway?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, sir." A moment passed. The CEO leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly as if deciding whether honesty was worth the risk. "Our core logistics platform keeps failing during peak traffic," he said. "We've thrown teams at it, consultants, new frameworks. Nothing holds." Daniel listened, not as a candidate, but as a problem solver. His posture shifted subtly, shoulders relaxed, eyes focused. "What kind of failure?" he asked. "Memory leak, deadlock, data inconsistency." The CTO's chair creaked as he leaned forward. "Intermittent crashes, only under heavy load. We scale horizontally, but the response times spike, and then everything collapses." Daniel walked back toward the table without asking permission. "May I?" he said, gesturing to the whiteboard. The CEO hesitated, then nodded once. "Go ahead." Daniel picked up the marker. His mind moved quickly, assembling patterns from years of late-night fixes and quiet breakthroughs. He drew a simplified version of their system architecture, speaking as he wrote. "You're distributing requests across nodes," he said. "But this service here," he circled a component, "acts as a centralized state manager." The CTO frowned. "It has to. That's how we maintain consistency." "Yes," Daniel replied. "Consistency doesn't require serialization at this level." He underlined a variable, then paused. "This resets on every concurrent call," he said. "Under low traffic, it's fine. Under load, it creates a race condition. You're not crashing because of volume. You're crashing because of order." The room fell silent. The CTO stood up slowly, walking closer to the board. "That variable, we assumed it was isolated per instance." "It is," Daniel said, "until this callback reassigns it globally." He erased one line, rewrote it cleaner, simpler. "Move the state downstream." Daniel continued. "Let the nodes fail independently. You don't need to protect the system from chaos. You need to design for it." No one spoke. The CEO stared at the board, then at Daniel. "How long did it take you to see this?" Daniel capped the marker and set it down gently. "About 10 seconds, he said. "The symptoms are classic." The CTO let out a quiet laugh, half disbelief, half relief. "We've been staring at this for 6 months. Daniel shrugged lightly. "Fresh eyes help, so does not overthinking." The HR manager looked unsettled now. The interview was no longer under her control. The CEO stood up. "What do you do now?" he asked. "I freelance," Daniel replied. "Mostly remote work. I build systems that don't wake people up at night." The CEO smiled faintly at that. "And before that?" "I led a back-end team for a fintech firm," Daniel said. "Left when my wife got sick." The CEO nodded slowly, the pieces rearranging themselves in his mind. "You didn't mention any of this in your resume." Daniel met his gaze. "You didn't ask." A long pause followed. The kind where decisions shift direction. The CEO turned to the CTO. "Would this fix it?" The CTO nodded without hesitation, "Yes. And it would reduce our infrastructure cost by at least 30%. The CEO exhaled, a sound that carried months of pressure with it. He looked back at Daniel, no longer as a candidate, but as an answer. "You were walking out the door," the CEO said. "Why did you stop?" Daniel thought of the door handle, of the clock, of his daughter waiting at school. "Because problems don't care about timing," he said, "and neither do solutions." The CEO extended his hand. "Sit down," he said. "We need to talk." For the first time that morning, Daniel smiled, not out of relief, but recognition. This wasn't luck. This was alignment. Daniel sat back down, the chair no longer feeling like a temporary stop, but something sturdier, as if the room itself had shifted to make space for him. The CEO didn't return to his seat immediately. He paced once, slowly, eyes fixed on the whiteboard, then on Daniel, then back again, as though testing whether this moment was real or would disappear if he looked away too long. "Clear the next 30 minutes. The CEO said without looking at anyone in particular. The HR manager hesitated. "You have a board call. Move it," he replied, firm but controlled. "This is more important." That single sentence changed everything. Laptops closed. Phones were silenced. The interview that had already ended was quietly reborn as something else entirely. The CEO finally sat across from Daniel, folding his hands on the table. "I'm going to ask you a question I should have asked earlier," he said. "What do you actually want?" Daniel blinked, surprised by the honesty. He considered giving a careful answer, something polished and safe. Instead, he chose the truth. "I want stability," he said. "I want work that respects outcomes more than appearances. And I want to be home in time to make dinner." No one laughed, no one flinched. The CEO nodded slowly. "That's refreshingly clear." The CTO leaned forward. "If you implemented this fix," he said, gesturing to the board, "how long would it take?" Daniel thought for a moment. "To stabilize production, a day. To optimize and refactor safely, a week, maybe 2 if we document it properly." The CTO's eyebrows rose. "That's half the timeline we projected." Daniel shrugged. "You projected based on fear. Fear slows things down." The CEO smiled at that, then turned serious again. "You understand what we do here?" "Yes," Daniel said. "And more importantly, I understand what you're trying to protect." The CEO's gaze sharpened. "Explain." "You've grown fast," Daniel continued. "Your systems were built for success, not scale. Now you're protecting the company from its own momentum. That's why this problem feels personal." The room was silent again, but this time it was different. It wasn't disbelief. It was recognition. The CEO leaned back. "You're right," he said quietly. "And we've been hiring people who look good in meetings instead of people who can sit with discomfort long enough to solve it." He looked directly at Daniel. "I don't care about the gap in your resume." The HR manager shifted in her seat. "I care," the CEO continued, "that you solved a problem my best people couldn't. Without preparation, without access, without incentive." Daniel met his eyes. "I had incentive. I don't like broken systems." The CEO laughed, a short, genuine sound. "Neither do I." He stood up again and walked to the window, staring out at the city Daniel had been watching earlier. "You said you're a single father."
"Yes. How old is your daughter?"
8. The CEO nodded. "Mine is 10. Different circumstances, but I've missed more dinners than I can count." He turned back. "I don't want this company to reward sacrifice that destroys people's lives." Daniel said nothing. He had learned that promises mattered more when they weren't rushed. "We need someone who can think the way you do," the CEO said. "But I won't offer you a role that forces you to choose between work and family." He paused. "So here's my offer." The HR manager reached for her pen automatically. "Lead systems architect," the CEO said. "Full authority to redesign what needs fixing. Flexible hours. Remote first. You're judged by results, not presence." Daniel's chest tightened, not with disbelief, but with something heavier, possibility. "And the compensation?" Daniel asked, not apologetically, but responsibly. The CEO named a number. It was more than Daniel had expected. Enough to breathe. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. He pictured school mornings without panic, groceries without mental math, evenings without the constant hum of worry. "When would you need me?" he asked. The CEO smiled. "When can you start?" Daniel checked the time on his watch. He had 10 minutes before he absolutely had to leave. "Tomorrow," he said, "after school drop-off." The CEO extended his hand again, this time without hesitation. "Welcome aboard." They shook. The grip was firm, respectful, equal. As Daniel gathered his things, the HR manager cleared her throat. "We'll need to update the paperwork." "Please do," the CEO said. "And next time, let's not confuse availability with commitment." Daniel thanked them all, nodding to the CTO, who was already snapping photos of the whiteboard. When Daniel stepped out of the building, the city felt different, not brighter, not louder, just steadier. His phone buzzed. A reminder, school pickup. He smiled and started walking. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't running behind. He was exactly where he needed to be.